Assalamu alaikum. In this video, we're gonna discuss Kubernetes services in general and the NodePort service specifically. Kubernetes services are objects in Kubernetes that we use to enable communication between different applications inside a single Kubernetes cluster, and it enables also our external users to access our application inside the cluster. We have three types of services in Kubernetes. We have the NodePort service, the cluster IP service, and finally the load balancer service. So in this video, we're gonna try to understand how the NodePort service works, and later we will discuss the cluster IP service and the load balancer service. For the NodePort service, it enables our external users to access our application inside the Kubernetes cluster by mapping a port on the node to the port of the pod. Okay, so for example, if we have here a worker node, so here is our worker node, and we have our application running here inside the pod on this worker node. So we can use the NodePort service to enable our external users to access our application running on this pod on this worker node. The NodePort service will map a port on the worker node to the port of the pod. Okay, so by using the NodePort service, now any request coming from an external user to this port of the worker node will be received by the node port, and then it will be forwarded from the port of the NodePort service to the port of the pod. Okay, so let's say that here we are using the port 80 on the NodePort service, and we are using the same port on the pod. Here we have three types of port. First of all, the port on the pod is called the target port. The port on the service itself is called the port, and the port that we open on the worker node is called node port. The node port can be, for example, 30,002, because by default it will be between 30,000 and 32,767. We have to know here the differences between these three ports, because when we want to create a NodePort service, we have to define these three ports. So the target port is the port of the pod where our application is running. When we talk just about the port, so we talk about the port of the NodePort service. And for the node port, it is the port on the node that we open using the NodePort service. Here we may ask a question, how the NodePort service know the pods where it should forward the traffic to. Maybe here we have many pods with the same port on this worker node. So in a situation like that, how the NodePort service will choose the pod that it should handle the coming request. This is done using labels and selectors. So when we deploy a pod, we will assign to it some labels. So let's say that here, for example, we have type frontend, and now to tell the NodePort service about the pods that it should handle the coming requests, here we will use selectors. and we will say to the NodePort service that the pods that should handle the coming requests are the pods having the label type frontend. And here, because only these pods have the label type frontend, the coming requests will be forwarded only to this pod. Okay, because for the second pod here, we didn't have the label type frontend. And after setting up the NodePort service, we can access our application from the browser, for example, using the Node IP and the Node port. If we have many pods running our application on a single worker node, so let's say that here we have, for example, 2 pods running the same application for high availability purpose. Here we will create a NodePort service to map, for example, the port 30,003 of the worker node to the port 80 of the pods. Now, any incoming requests from external users on this port will be received by the NodePort service, and then it will be forwarded, and then it will be forward from the port of the NodePort, from the port of the NodePort service to one of these 2 pods. This will happen only if we set correctly the labels and the selectors. So for example, here for the pods, we should have the labels type frontend. So we have these labels on the 2 pods, and on the node port, we should have in the selector section the labels that we mentioned here. So here we have type frontend. This is how we tell the NodePort service about the pods that should handle the coming requests. So now all the requests coming to this port of the worker node will be forwarded through the node port to one of these 2 pods. The same story will happen if we have multiple pods on multiple worker nodes. So let's say, for example, that here we have 2 worker nodes. So here is our first worker node. And here we have a second worker node. Let's say that here on the first worker node, we have a pod running our application, and we have another pod on the second worker node running the same application. So here, as we did in the previous examples, we need just one NodePort service to map a port from each worker node to the port of the pods. So here we have the same story. So any coming request to the first worker node or to the second worker node on this port will be forwarded through the NodePort service to one of these 2 pods. as we did in the previous examples, here just we need to tell the NodePort service about the pods using labels and selectors. So if we have the labels type frontend on these two pods, we have to mention the same labels in the selector section of the NodePort service. So we have the same configuration. Either we have one pod running on a single worker node, multiple pods running on a single worker node, or multiple pods running on multiple worker nodes. And in the last example, where we have multiple pods running on multiple worker nodes, to access our application, for example, from the browser, we use the IP address of one of the worker node with the node pod. So I hope that is clear how the NodePort service works, and thank you very much.